Yo, welcome to the Put On Pod, experimentation number one. That's what we're going to call it. What's good, D? What's good, Steve? How are you
What's
guys?
up, Steve?
What's up, guys? Doing good.
Yeah, what's just quick because it just happened, depending on whether we get this out or not, but how'd you enjoy your Super Bowl Sundays?
You could go first, Steve, as the guest.
I don't know. Mine was pretty laid back. I mean, didn't do anything too crazy. Just hung out with my boys and watched the game. Was rooting for the Niners, but they had to just not drive home that final score. But
Yeah,
it is what it
I was
is.
kind of the same. I was hanging with my boys, and we were at a friend's house. And being like a former, pretty much degenerate gambler who doesn't really gamble anymore and didn't even have a single bet or like box or anything, it doesn't really have the same appeal to me anymore. Like I love playoff football, but like the Super Bowl for me is kind of like I don't know. I'm it's not as exciting as the other games. Do you feel that way at all?
I, I definitely think the Super Bowl is more like an
Yeah.
entertainment spectacle versus a football game. Like the NFC and AFC championships are probably better football. I mean, think about the halftime too. I was on a plane, so I didn't get to watch like the halftime show or most of the game, but the halftime show is always pretty long. It's pretty much like two separate football games. Like there's no fluidity in the game. So yeah, I'm bummed the Niners lost too, but I appreciate that both of you have families and just said that you were watching it with your boys. So that's how it should
Sure.
be done. I like that. I respect.
Um, Before we break it,
Uh,
before we jump into the put-ons, I think it would be helpful for people to know a little bit about Steve. Just give like the little background on who you are, what your relationship to this podcast is. Those sorts of details, if you don't mind, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. So name is Stephen Delsey or nada underscore sad life across social. I'm currently enlisted in the military as my kind of day job, but in the after hours of work, I'm actually your guys' producer, and I've been producer for almost like I guess 6 months producing about, but I've been working with you guys for like almost
Yeah,
a
it's
year now.
crazy. And
which
yeah,
seems
go
crazy.
on, Cal. What were you
Yeah.
gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say if that was a year goes by
And
quick.
Yeah, no,
and
it really does.
I think it's funny, like kind of the story of how we got connected to you in the first place. You want to just tell that really quickly, that little story?
Yeah, no, so I follow 137, which is a company that you both worked for, like kind of in the background, like consumed a lot of their content. And eventually you guys started this podcast. So I was like, oh, I'm going to start consuming that. Why not? Related to both of you because not only do you guys share a lot of the similarities that I have in terms of like content creators, sports, that sort of thing, but then especially with Derek, you're a dad as well, so related that way. And then following you guys, always putting out your stuff across my own social. And then eventually I was like, hey, I just need to hit these guys up. Like, I have some ideas. Let's see if they like them. So, shot you guys a message across then Twitter, now X, and you actually responded, blew my mind immediately. And then it was even crazier when you said we were about to actually message you. We were just talking about it. And then that relationship
Yeah,
started.
it's so funny because what, Cal, go.
No, you go. I was gonna
Well,
say something else.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say, like, we started it off and you were engaged like right away, and we wanted to do something on Twitter, now X, where we would kind of, have all the different put-ons and do like a thread, and you just like did it right away, like, and we were like, wow, like who is this guy? Why, like you were like a fan of what we were doing, and we really appreciated the fact that you were into it and that you were making these threads. So like me and Cal were like, we should reach out to this guy and see, what his deal is. And then it seemed like 30 minutes later, you reached out to us, which is like, kind of how the universe works in my mind. And then obviously, we talked and one thing led to another, and now here we are. But yeah, I just think it was very serendipitous how that all came to be. And I feel like that's how life works. So, I'm happy about the fact that we're now working together, and it's been a great little working relationship so far. So happy to have you as the first guest, Steve.
Steve,
Thank you.
I was just gonna ask, you know, through following your socials and seeing you before we, got together in doing this put on pod, what got you into content curation?
So for me, it was originally following Gary,
Okay.
taking a lot of
That was
his
the answer I
content,
was thinking.
and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then I had brought his book Crushing It on my deployment with me. So while I was like doing my watch rotations and stuff, I would read it, take notes, and kind of think of how I wanted to change the way I took on social, knowing the way kind of everything is moving toward being able to actually create a life through social media, not only just for yourself, but in terms of partnership deals, branding, everything of that nature. So I really wanted to do that not for myself, but also as like a side project because I'm also involved in the hobby. So I collect sports cards and stuff. So wanted
Yep.
to elaborate more on that. And then just talking with friends, everyone has some type of idea. So I was like, all right, well, let me kind of start giving my 2 cents about everything because I'm so invested in learning what this is. The best way to kind of learn is to do, in my opinion. So by helping out, all the close friends to artists that I've worked with in the past, it's just a matter of learning what this is and making it my own,
Yeah,
really.
and I think something that we both really appreciated about you was the fact that you were willing to just jump right in and get your hands dirty, right? And I think that's just a great lesson for anybody out there. Sometimes you don't know how to do something, like the idea of producing something sounds pretty daunting, and then you get in there and you just figure it out. So you got to start somewhere. And I think just the idea of you editing clips, which is something that is so needed by so many people right now, right? Especially in this day and age where content is what it is, right? And the landscape around it. So that was like a great little, test, and I think it showed that you could do it and that you could do much more than that too. And I think that, you know, it's something that I want to do myself more, is just get in the weeds of things and learn how to do things and acquire those skills. And me and Cal talk about that all the time. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with personal development. But anyways, Cal, what do you think? Should we jump into some of the put-ons?
Yeah, let's get into the first put on segment. Steve, we'll let you go first since you are our guest. Put us on to a podcast, my friend.
Okay, so recently I've been listening to a lot of the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast, and that's by the author Marc Manson of the book of
Yep.
the same name. And again, it's something that I read during my deployments. A lot of downtime out in the middle of the ocean, but I've been trying to learn how to live with my own depression and anxiety for the better part of a decade now. So not only outside of therapy, I try to put tools in my toolbox so that way, no matter the scenario, I have something I can kind of lean back to. So his book was written in a way to where I was like talking to a friend, almost hearing myself, but in a matter of a different perspective. So when he started putting out the podcast, it was like just curated parts of his book, more in depth. And then, of course, he brings on guests who are also involved in the mental health community or psychology and how, the brain works and finding happiness, what makes us happy, how do we take on responsibility for our actions, etc. So just being able to listen to that and kind of be able to go back and nitpick what I want to add has been helpful for myself. And, hopefully to all the other listeners, it helps them as well.
Was there any like?
Would you
I'm sorry.
say that there,
That's
you go,
so funny because we're
you
not
go,
used to like
I, it's,
kind of volleying back and forth.
man, it's the talking thing, which we'll get the hang of. But yeah, I'll try
I
to
was just going to ask, was there a particular guest that he had on that you listened to, or is it more of like a solo podcast?
No, so he kind of does it like every other episode, but I think the banter that he just has with his producer, funny enough, is really good because that's more curated. It's like it's himself. It's just having like a friend conversation with someone, and like if you were to go grab a drink with someone, So it's in those episodes where I feel like it's more laid back, and you can really kind of have it in the background and still take in the content.
that just on that note, that's interesting you say that. I've seen a bunch of stuff recently around, and I love this kind of podcast format, this kind of content format where it's really like, you know, someone's just kind of live streaming their day, or someone's just, you do go out for a drink with a business colleague, a buddy, whatever it is. And that conversation that's natural and had, because, let's call a spade a spade. We sit here in front of the camera with the mics out, like in our setup with all the things we do before. It's not, as much as we try to make the conversation flow and is natural, it's not as natural as it was going to be if the three of us went for dinner and was just having a conversation. So obviously, we're based in different spots and we can't do that on the regular. But, I think I really appreciate that sort of content where it is like, in a setting where the individuals are just having a conversation and you're getting, that full authenticity of that pod or the show or whatever that experience is. So I appreciate you saying that. D, do you have anything on that note? I know that you said you had a
Well,
pod as well, that you want to bring
yeah,
Steve and
I
I
was
onto.
going to say one thing on that note is I saw a Naval tweet. I think it was earlier today, but it was retweeted about what the world craves is authenticity. And I just sent it to myself because anytime I see something that just like resonates with me, I send it to myself. You know, really quick, just a couple of podcast episodes that I've listened to lately because like we haven't done one of these that so I just wanted to just do like a really quick on a few. One that just comes to mind based off of what you guys just said is I love Tim Ferris, and he did one the other day with a guy named Greg McKweon, who's the author of Essentialism, a great book. And he did a walk and talk interview with him because he's been having trouble with his back. And I just felt like it was a different interview based on the fact that they were walking, and just like the type of conversation that you have when you're walking and you're not really like facing each other. You're like both walking towards the same way. And, again, I love to walk. I've been cutting time out of my day each day to go for a walk. It's where I have the most amount of ideas. And I think that there is something to that natural kind of environment of having a conversation while doing something like that. A couple other just real quick ones. I mentioned this in kind of a short form video, but Rick Rubin's podcast, Tetragrammaton, is an incredible podcast that I recommend everybody listen to. I've been listening to one with him and Marc Andreessen, and it's just like a really great in-depth conversation that gets into the mind of one of the most decorated VCs of all time. Um, I listened to one a while back, Huberman Lab with Robert Greene, which kind of set me on this whole path of Robert Greene books, and didn't realize what an incredible author, storyteller that guy is. And that was just a great conversation. That was also the first time I've ever listened to Huberman Lab, and I was very impressed by that. Um, One other Ferris one that I just listened to was with a guy named William Ury, who's a master negotiator and just tells a lot of great, interesting stories about the negotiations that he's been involved with. Hugo Chavez, the Camp David Accords, Kim Jong Un, writing the other sides of victory speeches, which is a whole interesting concept in and of itself. And then the last one is that I listened to the Bill Simmons podcast with Larry David. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. And I just wanted to end on that because I don't know if anybody else listened. Cal, did you listen to that or no?
I saw a couple. I used to listen to Bill Simmons' podcast. Like that was the podcast that I listened to, and I haven't listened to it in a while. But I
So
did
I
see that
haven't listened
episode.
to it in a while either. And the only reason I got back into it is because the Knicks have been good and he does a lot of NBA content. So I've been trying to listen
Yeah.
to him. But this conversation with Larry David is so great because just like two or three things. One is that he's exactly the same person in real life as his character in Curb. Like has all the idiosyncrasies, whatever. So the two things I just wanted to mention to you guys is one is that he has this whole like theory or he thinks that the NFL he proposes that the NFL should get rid of field goal kickers and get rid of field goals altogether. And it's such a hilarious take on just the fact that, you know, the field goal kicker is the only person on the field that's not an actual football player. And then it comes down to the very end of the game and you send out this little, white guy to like kick a ball like through an arbitrary like field goal. It doesn't make sense if you really think about it. And not only that, what it would do is it would make every team have to either go for it on fourth down, which would make it more interesting, right? You're like down by the 10, like you just go for it, right? Or you'd still punt the ball, but there you'd see a lot more teams going for it on fourth down. And he was just saying, like in other sports, like in baseball, in the ninth inning, do they all of a sudden say, like, here's a target? You have to hit the ball into the target? Like, so I love that idea of just like shaking up the game. Like field goal kickers doesn't really make sense. And when you really think about it, he's got a good point. And then the only other thing I was going to mention is just he was talking about like the PA systems of stadiums and like how annoying it is when they like pipe in like this like loud like top 100 music, or like the PA announcers like screaming, and he's like so bothered by it. And I thought that was a good point too, because I'm a traditionalist and just like I love like going to the Knicks game and they're playing the organ music, right? Or like defense, and like these things where like you don't need somebody to be screaming and like this music to be blasting at a sports game. You can have silence. And I think it just speaks to the way that people are now, and needing like some sort of thing, like they can't sit alone, kind of like what the culture of social media is, and the reason why I have to bring my phone to the bathroom or else I'll have a panic attack. So yeah, those are all the different podcasts I've listened to. You have any questions or thoughts on those notes?
Just on the Rick Rubin note, I want to put you both onto something. I recently, so on Rick Rubin's interview with
Mm-hmm.
Joe Rogan, he's wearing orange light glasses. So I'm sure you guys have heard of blue
Yeah.
light glasses, obviously, but Rick Rubin wears the orange ones. And I forget the exact company, but he's involved in some glasses making company that are on these notes. And I was in Vegas this past weekend, and I got a pair because we had them in the gifting suite. And so the last, whatever, 5 nights, I've been probably an hour or two before I go to bed, I've been throwing on these orange light glasses, and night and day. Like I wouldn't say I have trouble sleeping, but in terms of like right, because I mean, I'm on my computer, I'm on my phone right up until I go to bed, and so I'm very stimulated. Like when I'm trying to sleep, I can still be on my phone and computer as I'm going to bed, but I have the orange light glasses on, and I
Really?
pass out right away. Like I have a. It's been 5 nights, so I can't say my sample size is extreme, but I would put you guys both on these orange light glasses. I can say specific type, but they're legit. I've been
Yeah,
sleeping
I was
real good.
interested by that, by like Rick Rubin talking about those orange light glasses. But by the way, he's one of those types of guys
Yeah.
where like anything he says or does, I will just follow. Like he's just he feels like he's enlightened, right? Like he's just on another level.
So you're on the orange light
Uh,
glasses. You get sleep,
maybe,
is what you're saying.
maybe. I'm a big supporter of anything Rick Rubin. So yeah, I guess I would try it out.
Unless they come out with orange lenses for prescription glasses, I think I'm kind of shit out of luck on that one.
That's not true, Steve. You could try.
They maybe have that. We'll have to look into it.
So I mean, they got the blue light, and these are transitions, but the orange, might be that new thing. Who knows?
I think it is. Yeah, it's going to be a trend. Everyone's going to be wearing orange light glasses soon. I called it here. I was wearing it in the airport and shit. Someone was like, "That was so cool, man." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Let's jump into the next segment. Creator has been a mainstay of our put-ons. I know Steve loves content. We all consume. Steve, we'll let you go first. Put us onto a creator you are enjoying at the moment, or social piece of content.
So I go through a lot of TikTok. I mean, obviously trying to find stuff for you guys to talk about, put you on kind of in the background. But someone who's been popping up on my feed a lot is at SWA Finance, and he does like stitch type videos against all these gurus that have flooded social media now. All these big like buff guys with massive beards, all this crazy jewelry for no reason. Just talking about like, oh, all you need to do is change your mindset, and tomorrow you can have $1 million. Like, okay, like, or like all you need like to have a new house, all you need to do is buy this house for the money you don't have. It's like it doesn't make any sense. And he films it like in his garage, so you can tell he's just like a regular dude, but against all these guys who a lot of younger males, I would say, follow and like, oh yeah, that makes total sense, when in all reality it doesn't. So just seeing that and having that like that satirical just
Yeah,
commentary on the whole matter. It's just like, yeah, it makes sense. It's one of those things where people are so influenced obviously by what they see, especially if it's that, one like, and then that's all they end up seeing on their feed. So I can only imagine the type of content these people see where these guys are just yelling at them at the top of their lungs, saying that they just need to change their entire life and well-being in order to be cool or be in.
It's so funny how impressionable people are. And like, you're right. There's so many of those types of creators that are very convincing. And you're just like, oh, okay. Like that sounds easy enough. And then you like start to think about it and you're like, actually, wait a second. And so whenever there's a creator that comes and like pokes fun at that type of content, I always get such a kick out of those people. And I mean, man, it's so oversaturated with all these different types of content. So again, like just finding the comedic angle to it always tickles me. What's the name of that creator again?
It's at
Okay.
SWA Finance. I can send you guys a link.
Definitely going to check that out.
on the comedy vibe. I've got a guy who every time I see him come up, I start chuckling before I even watch the video. But this guy, he does skits. His name's Zach Irific, like Zach the name, and then Irific, I think. I'll have to double check the spelling, but he essentially does these skits. He does all sorts of different things, but the skits are like, you know, it'll be like he'll call his girl in like she's on a trip in Paris, and she'll be like, oh, and he does all the voices. So he does the female voice, he does his voice, he gets in this crazy laugh, and then like again, the skit is always very funny where she's like, "Oh yeah, I met this guy named, they call him Grand, Très Grand," and then he's like, "Oh, like is that because he's super tall?" And she's like, "No." And again, he's doing all these voices. He's like, "Oh, is that a joke because he's super small?" She's like, "No." He's like, "Why do they call him?" He's like, "Oh," and then she just hangs up. And so like, yeah, definitely go check this guy out. All the skits are super funny. And so yeah, Zacharific is my comedy
I have a
creator.
comedy creator too. It's a guy named Tom Fell at Tom Fell. And he does these videos that are like supposed to, they're all around work culture. And it's like, you know, I'm gonna burn out and die in a shallow grave. And like it's like all this like exuberant, like really depressing but like hilarious type of content. And like he's always up in the camera and he's like, I'm gonna get on a Zoom call and pretend that I'm friends with all of the employees, and it's just, and then he like falls back on the bed. Oh man, he kills me every single time. And I always
That's
send
funny.
it to like
I do
4 or
check this
5
guy.
different people, and he's a hilarious guy, mustache, long hair. So I would check him out. I also just wanted to mention two trends on content. Oh, what, you got a question for me on him?
No, but on that, like I'm gonna pretend I'm friends with all these people on the Zoom call. Have you guys seen the? I don't know what content creator is, but there's always like four of them on like a Zoom call, and the Zoom call is recording, and they're like, "Brian, do you have the memo for this so and so brand today?" And then he'll pull up his screen. It'll legit be like 2 slides. And it'll be like his like 1-year-old daughter like made like drew all over it and shit. And so on the like work, I see a bunch of comedy on like the workplace, work from home, different skits.
Yeah,
I think that's funny. And
it's
I've seen the guy
always
who's got
funny.
it.
Or like when they're doing like the lingo of how people talk over Zooms and like Google Meet, just
Hmm.
kills me every time.
Yeah, they have to throw as many
Yeah, the
buzzwords in. Yeah.
buzzwords, they get me every time. I was just gonna mention two types of content, like trends. Okay. One thing that I cannot get enough of is reaction videos by younger people to music that they've never listened to before. So like uh I went through a compilation thing the other day of like young kids listening to the song Freebird for the first time. And I don't know, like, I'm sure Steve knows the song, Cal. It might be way before your time, but there's like a guitar solo at the end of
Yeah.
Freebird that is like mind blowing. And so to watch people experience that for the first time, I'm going to send you guys this compilation of like, it's like 12 or 15 different creators listening to it for the first time, and it's incredible. I love watching somebody experience something great for the first time. So there's that. And then there was one where they were doing it to that song Black Betty. Do you know that song from the movie Blow? So good. So it's that type of content that I'm really into these days. And then the other one on a completely other like random note is bushcraft content. Have you guys ever heard of bushcraft content?
You
So
put
that I
that
have.
Yeah. So it's
before,
basically,
I
it's
think.
like a guy will be in the woods and it's all time lapsed. And then he'll literally build himself a house or shelter out of wood and like chop the wood and then like build it and then like put the mud in it and the stones and like build a little bed and a fireplace. And it seems like he's built himself an entire house in like a day or two. And as somebody who is literally incapable of doing anything like that, like not even remotely, I could not even, start a fire. Like it's just like it's like watching a superhero. It's incredible. And I don't know, I guess there were people back in the day that had to do these types of things, but just somebody that can like do things with their hands and just it's like the epitome to me of like being a man is like watching these guys build a full shelter. Sometimes the houses are I'm like I would live in like I would literally live in that house for like a couple of days, that little shack that you've just built. It's really incredible. So I don't have a specific creator on that note, but if you just type in bushcraft content into TikTok search or Instagram, you'll see a lot of those types of videos.
There is something like around the content of being in the woods. I don't know, just like with technology and us on our phones, but then getting like into the woods on the and then building something. I've seen like the ones where it's ASMR cooking and the guy's like got the
Oh, I've
knife and
seen
he's throwing
those
it
on
up
the
to the
stone,
fire.
on like the hot
It's like,
stone. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, he's on the stone thing. Like it's like very like homey and mask, and it's like that looks so. Yeah, I
you're
like
right.
that
There's a good
content.
contrast there, right?
I think
Between
yeah,
like being on technology on your phone and then seeing somebody completely
but
without any
yeah,
technology being able to just survive. It's interesting. There's a good
even though they even though they need
right,
technology to
exactly.
record whatever they're doing, but yeah, uh,
Yeah, and then you put yourself in that like environment, and you're like, wait,
Yeah,
why am I doing this?
it makes me
yeah,
think of that episode of did you ever see the episode of The Office where Michael goes out into the woods to try and like survive and like
Yes.
it's incredible. That's a good one. Yeah, so that's what I got on the social front.
next, we are going to get into the book segment of the Put On. I believe, and Steve, feel free to chime in if you've got one. I'm going to kick it to you, Derek. I know that you've got one, two, maybe four books to put us on to, but
Yeah, I have two books. And by the way, my family is going away for a week coming up in like a couple of days without me. This is like the one like week
all
they're
right.
going to Florida and I have like 6 days, 7 days by myself. And it's the one time during the year where I'm just like alone. What?
I
Oh
remember
yeah.
you loving that. You had this last year, and
Yeah.
you
And the
were yeah.
reason why I'm bringing it up is because yesterday I ordered 4 books and I plan to read all 4 of them while they're gone. And this is when like I literally just, zen out and just have complete silence and just alone with my thoughts and yeah, so you have very few and far between times where you have complete silence like that, right, Steve? Um, so just two
Mm.
books to mention. One is a book by a guy that I mentioned before, Robert Greene, called Mastery. Right, so I got put on listening to the podcast with him on Huberman, and then I ended up listening to another podcast with him on Rick Rubin's podcast, and then I was just like, I got to read this guy's book. So I read his book Mastery, which is basically just like explores the paths to achieving mastery in any field, finding your purpose, and then like uncovering a bunch of principles and strategies behind a couple of famous people and how they use these different things to reach the pinnacle of their fields. So there's like anecdotes of Leonardo da Vinci and Darwin and all of these great kind of like different masters, the Wright brothers. And it's just very, I think it's really interesting just from as somebody that's still trying to find my purpose and trying to, identify like what is my craft and what is the field that I want to pursue. It's really interesting to kind of go into some of these different people's lives and see where they started from and how they had like an apprenticeship towards what they eventually ended up doing, and the path that they carved. One aspect of it that I thought was particularly interesting was just he really kind of hones in on the idea of going back to your childhood and kind of identifying what was your early passion and interest before you were influenced by all of these outside factors. And a lot of times he made a correlation between what those things were in all of these different people's childhoods and then what they ultimately became. And there really is like a connection. And so, I was thinking about my own kind of childhood and there's a lot of parallels just in terms of what I've ended up doing and what I wanted to be when I was a kid. And for me, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, right? But I also really enjoyed just like being creative and storytelling. And I think specifically those two things, that like storytelling and creativity, are things that definitely carried over. And then I didn't become an NBA. I didn't become a professional NBA player, but I definitely have done a lot of things in sports. And so that connection is there. I wanted to ask you guys, what was it when you were really young? What was the thing that you were like the most passionate and interested in? And have you found any correlation between that and what you do now? And by the way, let me start with Steve, because you're our
So
guest. Steve, you start.
I let him. Yeah.
funny enough, we kind of align on that. I was very creative as a young kid. I mean, I did like story writing for me and my friends. I'd write stories like involve all of us, share it and have them kind of commentate like, oh, like this should happen to so and so. But it was the stereotypical like, oh, first I wanted to be a baseball player, and then eventually I picked up music. I was like, oh, I want to be in a rock band eventually. And as the time kept going on, I lost a bit of that creativity. So of course now being an adult and being able to kind of take control of what I'm doing for myself, especially as I see my naval career kind of winding down, what do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? So that's why I started getting into the creativity of, when it comes to editing, actually recording stuff. I did like backyard movies with a friend in high school that were just like, shits and giggles. I bet now it's like, dang, I should have really like looked into it earlier. Maybe my life trajectory would have been totally different, but that's
right.
here nor there.
Yeah, it's not too late. It's not too late. Cal, what about you?
Yeah, it's same sort of vibe. I was super competitive as a kid. And so always was trying to, make a quick buck. Like I think I've told before, selling like Blue Attack, doing different, selling candy, all these things, just like that entrepreneurial spirit. But I mean, from day one, like the first thing I ever did after walking was kick a ball. I always wanted to, play proper footy. And I feel like, me, that's maybe my only thing in life where I could have, continued a bit and given it a bit more of a go. But I would say I'm happy with where I got at with my footy career, and that's what I wanted to do. And I would say between the business and entrepreneurial side of my childhood and the sports, but specifically proper footy, the work is correlated. I'm super lucky and grateful to be working with prem players and be doing this in sport and be getting an entrepreneurial knack in this. And so yeah, it all I'd never really think back to my early days in my childhood on a day to day, but it is interesting that you just made that, correlation between what you were doing and what your passions were as a child. And then, trying to find those passions and making sure your life is similar to those and you're getting that same sort of, what is it? What do they call it? It's a certain name for, but that childlike feeling, like when you're a kid and you're super passionate about something and then recreating that as an adult, I think is super important
Yeah,
for
that
all of us.
childlike
So yeah,
wonderment,
that's my,
maybe. But
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
think
Something along those
yeah,
lines. I do have to say, Cal, along the lines of selling candy, that was also something I did. Like, especially after Halloween, any leftover candy we had, I'd sell to
Oh,
kids at school.
that's pure
I was
profit.
also like yeah, I was original like Redbox back in the day. I used to have friends who like had parents who didn't let them buy any like mature rated games and stuff. I'd let them rent Grand Theft Auto from me and stuff because I
That's
had it and they didn't.
funny.
Whatever, so I can make money, so I can go out, buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards, buy a new game, like
I
whatever it
like
was,
it.
I
You
found a
guys were
way to.
you guys were
That's
real
amazing.
young entrepreneurs and you didn't even realize it. And by the way, I had like my first kind of foray into being an entrepreneur was sports cards. And I was obsessed with sports cards. I go to all the shows, whatever. And then they all turned out to be worth nothing because I was like part of the junk era of sports cards. And but it was a great learning experience to go through failure that early on. Oh, so then one other book just to mention, unless Cal, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, no.
The book that I guess I'm like 3/4 of the way finished through right now is a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He's a psychologist. Have you heard of this book? Have you
Yeah,
read it,
I
Cal?
have. No, no, but
So
I've heard of it.
basically, it's like an exploration of the principles behind why people say yes and how to apply these principles, like in an ethical way in a bunch of various contexts. What I could see, I always can see when you're
You
like
said you were gonna
formulating
use
your question, but yeah, go for it.
Oh, because you were like, yeah, this is how the big brands communicate to us and how they get us to buy things, and you're like, fuck, I'm gonna use these same things when I'm trying to
Well, yeah,
convince some to do
because it's
some.
the
So
psychology
yes,
of persuasion. That's like the subtitle is it's all about persuasion and it's so super interesting because you see a lot of the things that you do unconsciously and just like human behavior things of why you are influenced to behave in certain ways, right? And so he breaks it down into a couple of different principles. There's 6 of them. One is I always have a trouble saying this word, like, but reciprocation, reciprocity, I guess is what it is. Commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity, and basically just shows how people and companies are able to persuade other people. I'm trying to think of like an example on the fly, but like I'll give you one or two. It's like one is how like companies will make things that they can't sell, they'll make them more expensive. And then people will naturally think, oh, because it's more expensive, now they want to buy it. You know what I mean? And so, like, sometimes you have,
yeah,
he has this thing where it'll be like, I think it's called click run. And it's just like, you're used to doing certain things where you don't have to think about it. Right. And so, eh, you'll just turn to that switch on and it's like, oh, that's more expensive, then I want it. Or, oh, there's less of those things, so now I want it, right? And like, I guess I was just reading
yeah.
like the last example I was reading is like some guy who was buying cars like from the newspaper and then the next week relisting them, and he had like this system where he would have 3 people might reach out and say, oh, I'm interested. So he would schedule them all to come at the same time. And then he would use that psychology, right? So the first person would show up, and then the second person would show up. And he would tell the second person, oh, this first person got here first. And then the first person would be like, oh shit, there's like somebody else. And now I want this thing more, right? Whereas before the person showed up, it's like they're doing and then the third person shows up and it's like there's so many ways in which um people use this psychology to enhance their sales, even like little things like they found where waitresses, if they leave like a little candy with the tip, it increases tips like 75%, and like so there are all these, yeah, little
Like a little
note, like
note or
a car
something on there
salesman,
too.
Oh, smiley
car
face.
salesman, the most like successful car salesman of all time would send like a letter to like 30,000 people just being like, I like you. And then somehow all these people are like, have it stuck in their head. They're like, oh, I like that guy too. He likes me, and they don't even, it's like, it goes so deep into your subconscious. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about like how I can kind of, ethically persuade people to do the things that I want or to get the things that I want or just to learn about like how human behavior works. It's a really interesting book on that note, and I recommend it. Influence by Robert Cialdini.
So now something I want, because of
Okay.
that, I want to put you onto is a book called Surrounded by Idiots. And I actually have it right here. It's by
Okay.
Thomas Erickson. And it's kind of along the same lines. It goes over the four like emotional types of people and what makes that person. So you gain an understanding of them, and then he goes into like how they tick and how they operate. So then you learn how you can kind of manipulate the situation. Like, oh, they want to hear these types of like sentences or this way of structure of conversation. So you use that, and you kind of get your way and make them
I'm
go align with
fascinated by
whatever
stuff
you
like that.
want.
That's a good one. I'll check that out. I love persuasion type books like that.
I think I need to read both of
Yeah.
those. Yeah, that like I'm sitting here like shit. Yeah, this is super interesting. I gotta check both these out. We need to drop them in the chat or put them in the links or something. I
For
need to get
sure.
both of these.
Yeah, so those are the two books. I got four more books
Should
coming
we?
my way. I'll let you guys know about those 4 books after this week.
Perfect. To conclude, we like to, give our life, personal, professional, whatever kind of takeaway that we each have. Appreciate you being here today, Steve. We're gonna give you the floor for your takeaway, and then we'll do our two, and we'll be on our way. But yeah, Steve, what is your biggest takeaway from your life?
So right now, currently, as I just had therapy earlier this week, the takeaway I have is learning to enjoy yourself and like being okay with not having things done. Um, Turns
Yeah,
out, like from growing up, it was very big on like I need maybe not perfection, but I need to be close to it. Like things need to be completed until, like in a kid's mentality, I can play, and that's transcended into my adult life to where I can try to be relaxed and I can play video games, be watching Netflix, whatever. But in my head, everything's still going like, oh, I need to get that clip done for the guys. Oh, I need to, do this. Oh, I need to follow up on that. Whatever
yeah,
the case may be, my brain does not rest. So learning to kind of turn that switch off and be like, no, like I'm okay. It's fine that the things aren't done. I've earned this relaxation. Because I mean, I'm only 30 years old, but it's like a lot of work. I got military miles on me, so it's been kind of hectic. So to finally be in a place to where it's like, no, I've earned this rest is what my
Love
takeaway is
that.
right now.
that's I love that. I think I relate to that, and it's funny. I was actually having a conversation with my girlfriend last night actually around this. Is that I could never before sit down and play video games or watch TV and actually enjoy, because to your point, it's like, hey, I need to be doing more. I want to, if I want to be ahead of everyone else my age, why the fuck am I here? Watching TV, playing video games because that's probably what they're doing. So hey, let me work. I can't enjoy myself doing that. And she was kind of telling me, hey, I'm doing too much enjoying. I'm too much watching TV, too much. And my kind of thing is like, as long as you're enjoying and you're happy, and you're not dropping the ball on life just in general, I think that enjoyment should be had, and should be, you know, it's almost like, it should be glorified in the sense that, Steve, if you get so much enjoyment out of playing video games and you have the time and you can allow yourself to play for 5 hours a day, why not? Like, you know what I mean? Don't, let's stop judging ourselves, and be more, willing to accept the fact that we are who we are and we enjoy what we enjoy, and we should have more of
It's
that in our
also
life.
it's
So
also it's
I
also
like that.
healthy,
I like
right? Like because if you just if you're just like going hard the entire time, then you're going to burn out. And so I think like the best performers, it's like they go hard and then they rest. And then they go hard and then they rest, right? You can't just go hard continuously. So I think these things that you get value, even if it's entertainment value or enjoyment out of, they're good for your mental health. And then that
yeah,
translates to your physical and emotional health as well.
yeah,
But it's like to like Cal's point, it's one of those things where society now it's almost driven everyone to be like, no, you need to continue working. Like if you don't, the world's going to collapse around you. And kind of going back to those gurus, like while they don't make any sense, that's the type of stuff people are hearing on a constant basis. Whether it's like denial from this job or not meeting the standards of someone else, from like a project or something. And then it's like, dang, like I need to continue pushing myself, or else the second I
Right.
stop, everything's over. Like I'm not gonna have a life.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and it's funny. I kind of volley back and forth between the two, and I think anytime you hear something that resonates with you in that way, it's like good for the soul, right? Because you're just like, you know, that is what you need to hear, is that like you can have that enjoyment, like you shouldn't feel guilty about that. Not everything is like, a life and death, I need to get this done. It's like I'll get it done, but like I can also have some balance in my life. Cal, you got a takeaway? Yeah.
I was ugly crying.
Yeah. My takeaway is on we talked about it earlier, authenticity. My takeaway is just gonna be a quote that I saw and that I really liked. But here, and again, I don't know exactly by who. I just saw it in a on social. And so it goes, the most authentic thing about us is our capacity to create, to overcome, to endure, to transform, to love, and to be greater than our suffering. And so, yeah, that is my takeaway. And I just want
Nice.
to sit on a quote.
I love the authenticity piece. I sent you guys that Robert Greene, like originality is power thing right before earlier today.
Yeah.
I have I have I have one that's a kind of like a quote too, and then I have one that's just a tweet from Jesse Itzler. So I'll read Jesse's first because it's kind of like, yeah,
Yo, just before,
I know what you're gonna do. You're gonna make fun of me
and
that I have more than
every,
one, right?
yeah, every time. He says he has one, but he has one of like four things. I got one of it, but I also have one of like, oh no, I have four things. No, I
I
got
have
one.
one plus one more. That's how I see it. You know what I mean?
Two. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Anyways,
Okay. You
okay.
go.
This one just makes me think about my life and where I'm at right now. But Jesse Itzler fired off this tweet the other day that said, the chips don't always fall where you want them to. Sometimes things are out of your control and you can only control your effort. But when you empty the tank, you have no regrets. If you're going to do something, full send in caps. Right. And I think we talked about this like a couple of weeks ago about like, you were talking to me, I was doing some project and you were saying like, are you nervous about giving your ideas and somebody taking your ideas? And I'm always of the belief of just like, I'm not going to hold anything back. Right. I'm just going to go all out. Right. If I can go all out and like full send, like Jesse's talking about, then I do feel like then I've done everything that I can do, and the chips, will fall where they may. But I want to have no regrets in that regard, and so that tweet really kind of resonated with me, and felt very kind of relevant to just my life situation. Everything that I'm going through is just, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it balls to the wall, and then yeah, and then the other one is I read a book, I guess a couple months ago called The Art of Possibility, and they had this one section in it. It was like a little anecdote, and it was about this rule number 6, and basically this guy had on his desk a thing that said rule number 6, and everybody kind of knew what that meant within this person's like universe, and so when anybody would freak out, he would just be like, "Don't forget rule number 6." And then like they would have to like compose themselves. And rule number 6 is don't take yourself so goddamn seriously. And so I actually have a piece of paper right next to me over here that says always remember rule number 6, because there are so many times in my life where I'm overwhelmed or I'm like, in this serious mind state. And I just have to fucking take that step back and remind myself, like, chill out. Don't take yourself too seriously. Like everything's going to be okay. And I don't know. I just like the idea of some coded rule that only a couple people know about. But rule number 6, to anybody that wants to subscribe to that, don't take yourself too seriously.
I think we need to end on that. I like that. I think that we love to joke around here. So yeah, we don't take ourselves too seriously. Derek's always got 6 different things. Steve, appreciate you being on. Thought that was good. Until next time.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate everyone. Yeah, the Put On Pod, we out. Thank you for tuning into the Put On Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to follow us on social at